Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. President Biden is set to speak shortly about the economy as concerns grow that the U.S. could be heading toward a recession. The White House says the president will discuss his plan to fight inflation and lower costs for working families. The Dow is down more than 4,000 points since the beginning of the year. Right now, you're seeing it up about 30. And gas prices have hit an all-time high as Americans across the country face the highest inflation in decades. We will bring you the president's remarks live when he speaks, and we'll have more on the economy in just a moment. But first, the latest on the war in Ukraine. Ukraine officials now say Russian forces have fired several missile strikes into the port city of Odessa, killing at least one person. This comes as Ukraine's national police chief tells ABC News that his officers are currently investigating more than 10,000 cases of alleged war crimes in areas previously occupied by Russian forces. ABC News foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burridge joins me live now from Kyiv. Tom, where does this investigation stand right now? Any talks of possible charges?
Diane, this investigation's at an early stage. They're gathering evidence, they're identifying bodies. I think charging people is the ultimate aim for the Ukrainian police. They want to not only charge the individual Russian soldiers who committed these crimes, but also the top brass that gave the orders. But getting someone into a court of law, possibly an international court, that's a much, much harder thing. And I'll give you an example. Take the civilian airliner MH17, which was shot down over eastern Ukraine in the summer of 2014. There was a massive international investigation. They identified the Russian-backed separatist soldiers who fired the missiles. They determined that they were Russian-supplied surface-to-air missiles, but no one was ever tried in an international court. There was a court process in the Netherlands because lots of people on that plane were from the Netherlands, but those people, the culprits, courtroom.
And Tom, in the Kyiv region alone, police say that they have so far recovered more than 1,200 bodies of civilians who were killed. How are they working to identify them, and how long is that expected to take?
It's a really complicated process. There are still, as things stand, 258 bodies recovered in this region, which have still not been identified. So they're taking DNA samples from the bodies, possibly DNA samples from relatives. They then have to identify the DNA. Some of the bodies, though, in the meantime, are actually being buried because they've got so many bodies, they can't really safely keep them in the morgues in that area. And basically, it's a very morbid and long process. And once people's bodies are identified, they've got help from French police officers who are here in Ukraine to speed that process up. They've got better technology to make the DNA identification process quicker. Then people are given a proper burial. It's a very morbid process.
It sure is. And Tom, what are you hearing about these missile strikes in Odessa? Any updates?
Yeah, well, Odessa is really taking quite a few missile strikes from the Russians in the last few days. Overnight, several missile strikes on that city and that region, a key port city in the southwest of Ukraine, remember. One missile strike on a shopping centre. In total, one person killed, around 6 injured. We've also had a big piece of news from Izium. It's a town up in the northeast of Ukraine, near Kharkiv, the second biggest city in this country. There, the Ukrainian authorities have recovered more than 40 bodies from the rubble of a building. The bodies have been left there since March when the Russians controlled that particular area. And that's just another graphic illustration of the cost of this invasion to the Ukrainian people.
All right, Tom Sufi-Burridge in Kyiv, Ukraine for us. Tom, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
And President Biden is set to address the nation on the state of the economy within the hour. The Dow Jones is down more than 4,000 points since the beginning of the year. Meanwhile, gas prices have hit an all-time high, and analysts say that's adding to already crushing inflation. So let's bring in ABC News financial contributor Alexis Christoforous along with ABC's Kenneth Moton in Washington for more on all of this. Alexis, what do you make of what's happening in the markets over the past few days?
It has really been pretty stunning to watch the speed at which stocks have been coming down. I mean, we're a little bit higher today, but a lot of people are saying this is just sort of a fake bounce. Investors are just looking for some bargains, and so they're pushing stocks higher. The main cause for the drop is that there is talk about a recession on Wall Street. Investors believe that the Federal Reserve is not going to be able to achieve that soft landing they're looking for. You know, they're raising interest rates to kind of bring down demand, bring inflation lower. But investors believe that those rates are going to go up so aggressively, so fast, that it's going to pull the economy back so much that we'll tip ourselves into a recession. And I think Wall Street's starting to jockey position here as they look out to a recession at some point in 2023.
Now, Kenneth, what more can the Biden administration do to try to help the economy? What do you expect to hear from the president on that today?
Well, Diane, President Biden will talk about what he plans to do, but he's also going to talk about what he has done, lowering the price of internet, tapping to the strategic petroleum reserve to lower gas prices, executive action to fix a so-called family glitch in the Affordable Care Act, freezing student loan payments for students until August. No doubt action is key here, Diane, but it's also about messaging for this president and the White House. So you're going to hear the president talk a lot about his plan to fight inflation and what he's doing to lower those rising costs for American families, and contrast that with congressional Republicans and what their plans are. A White House official telling us that the president will label the Republicans and their plans as ultra MAGA, which really shows how Trump continues to loom over. It's a line of attack we heard from the president last week, Diane, but apparently that was an appetizer because we're going to hear a lot more of it.
Now, Alexis, we're also awaiting the new Consumer Price Index report. It's expected to show that inflation peaked in March. So what would that mean? Right.
So that CPI report is due out tomorrow morning. And the fact that President Biden is speaking today about inflation and highlighting what he's doing to help bring prices down doesn't bode well for tomorrow's report. It's as if the Biden administration is trying to get ahead of it. So we're not expecting great news. What we're hoping to see is that inflation has, as you say, peaked, which would mean it will stay at elevated levels, but it's not coming down. And it's also not going up anymore. So sort of stable inflation, if you will, but that's still not great news for Americans or for this president, since prices are up 8.5% over the past year, now their highest level in more than 4 decades.
And Kenneth, the White House official says that Biden will also call out Republicans for criticizing his moves to fight inflation without giving a plan of their own. But Republicans did warn about inflation and were largely dismissed by Democrats. So how precarious is this topic for the president and the Democrats in general going into midterm elections?
Diane, President Biden and the Democrats are vulnerable here when it comes to the economy and inflation. Our recent polls show that most Americans believe that it's the Republicans who can tackle the economy and inflation here. You know, today we expect the president to really zero in on the Republicans and their plans as well, and really fine-tune his midterm message here with this speech. We also know that when it comes to who they're attacking, Rick Scott's tax plan has really been highlighted by this White House as they focused on that. Scott says he's trying to cut taxes here, but President Biden, you're going to hear him say that Scott's plan will raise taxes for about 75 million Americans. Even Mitch McConnell has criticized that Scott plan. Biden will also continue to brand rising prices as Putin's price hike. A lot is at stake in November, and President Biden knows that his agenda is on the line, Diane.
And so, Alexis, what are you looking out for as we sort of enter the rest of the week? The markets are about flat right now after huge declines over the last few days. What are you keeping your eye on?
I'm keeping my eye on what President Biden's saying and what the Federal Reserve is doing. I think, you know, investors are sort of having these knee-jerk reactions every time we have a press conference, every time the Fed comes out and speaks. They're looking at what they're saying and trying to understand the direction of interest rates and the direction of the economy. You know, President Biden, as Kenneth was just talking about, keeps calling it the Putin price hike. But the fact of the matter is that's a little misleading, because other reasons why we're having these large price hikes, supply chains are still disrupted. China now locking down again in a large way because of rising COVID cases there. And remember, we have a labor shortage in this country. So all of those things, of course, together with the ongoing war in Ukraine, continuing to push prices up. And there's very little this administration can do to stop it.
All right. Alexis Christoforous, Kenneth Moton for us in D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks.
And health officials are warning the country could face a COVID surge this summer. Infections have already more than doubled in the last month. Now, some experts say with at-home tests, those numbers may be being undercounted. ABC's Kaylee Hartung is at Senior Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, where thousands of healthcare workers are now on strike. Hi, Kaylee.
We are seeing some alarming new numbers across nearly the whole country. In 45 states and territories, cases have increased more than 10% in just the last week. And those are just the cases that we know about. Some experts are fearing, because people are testing at home or not at all, that cases are being undercounted and that this new wave we see coming is even bigger than the statistics suggest. Hospital admissions, they are jumping too nationwide in the past week, up 10%, totals that they say also may be undercounted. And adding to this problem, thousands of healthcare workers have walked out the job here in California. At Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, one of the top 10 hospitals in the world, union workers are demanding higher pay, more staffing, and safer working conditions. But throughout the strike, the hospital says it is prepared to remain open and fully operational with help from supplemental workers. Now, 2.5 years into the pandemic, this country is heading towards another grim milestone. In the next week, this country is expected to surpass 1 million COVID-related deaths. Diane.
1 million deaths. Kaylee Hartung, thank you. And the Senate voted unanimously to step up security around the Supreme Court justices after the leak of a draft decision that could overturn Roe v. Wade. Tensions are running high across the country, and there's still fencing surrounding the Supreme Court to keep protesters back. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the latest.
As the battle over abortion rights rages on, protesters gathering outside the home of Justice Samuel Alito overnight.
Alito is a coward!
On the heels of protests outside Justice Brett Kavanaugh and Chief Justice John Roberts' homes. Now the U.S. Marshals stepping in to protect the members of the High Court, and the Senate quickly moving to pass legislation that would extend security to family members. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell accusing demonstrators of trying to intimidate the justices.
It is an attempt to replace the rule of law with the rule of mobs.
This, as McConnell also indicates, overturning Roe could just be the beginning, saying it's possible Republicans could pursue a federal ban on abortion if they take control of Congress. The White House sounding the alarm.
We're at serious risk. You noted Mitch McConnell and other Republicans in Congress are talking about a national ban on a woman's right to choose.
In just 24 hours, Democrats will force a vote in the Senate to protect access to abortion. It's all but certain to fail. Senator Lisa Murkowski, the only Republican who said she would consider the legislation, now says she's a no.
Nothing's going to change. The vote's going to be the same.
If Roe versus Wade is overturned, as that leaked draft suggested, 26 states would ban or severely restrict access to abortion.
Diane, Democratic-run states say they will not wait for Congress to act. Connecticut and New York are moving to set up state funds to help out-of-state patients. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers in Louisiana have advanced a bill that would classify abortion as a homicide. It has left some fearing that it could restrict access to emergency contraceptives like Plan B if passed. Diane?
All right, Rachel Scott, thank you. Coming up, voters are heading to the polls today in more key primary elections. How a matchup between two GOP congressmen could be the next test of former President Trump's political power. Stay with us. Voters are headed to the polls today in Nebraska and West Virginia as primary elections ramp up for this year's midterms. In West Virginia, the state lost a House seat due to redistricting, so two incumbent Republican congressmen are running against each other. Former President Trump is supporting Alex Mooney, while Governor Jim Justice and Democratic Senator Joe Manchin have backed David McKinley. Meanwhile, there is drama in the three-way race for governor in Nebraska. Trump's favored candidate, Charles Herbster, has been accused of groping several women, including a state senator. Herbster has denied the allegations. 538 senior elections analyst Nathaniel Rakich joins me live now for more on all of this. Nathaniel, thanks for being here. This is another key test for former President Trump's power over the Republican Party. So do these allegations against Herbster make it a bigger challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's never a good thing when a candidate faces a scandal. We found that typically candidates suffer multiple percentage point penalty for scandals of this nature. And I would expect that Herbster would probably be doing a lot better today if he hadn't been facing this scandal. At the same time, I think that Trump's endorsement is keeping him buoyed up there. I think there are two other strong candidates in the race, as you mentioned. And if Herbster didn't have Trump's endorsement, those other two candidates would be leading right now.
And so who stands to gain if these allegations cause Herbster to lose support?
Yeah, honestly, that's an open question. You know, ideologically, you would expect maybe Jim Pillen to gain. He's a little bit closer. You know, you kind of have a spectrum in this race where Herbster is the kind of really pure Trumpy candidate. Jim Pillen is the more kind of establishment mainstream Republican, and Brett Lindstrom is more of a moderate. So if you're a Herbster voter who's turned off by those allegations, you might go to Pillen, who shares a lot of the same policy views, but just is a little bit more refined.
And what are you seeing in West Virginia in this race where two incumbent congressmen are running against each other?
Yeah, this is a really interesting race because they've been thrown together into the same district, as you mentioned. And Alex Mooney, who is Trump's endorsee, is another kind of, very pure, devoted follower of Trump. He voted against certifying the 2020 election, for example, whereas David McKinley is more of a bridge builder. In fact, literally so. He was one of only a few Republicans to vote in favor of the bipartisan infrastructure package. And he's generally known as someone who will reach across the aisle and is a little bit more bipartisan and willing to work with Democrats. So it'll be an interesting test case of whether Republicans are more interested in kind of collaboration and governance, or whether they kind of want to go the Trump route and be a little bit more bombastic in their rhetoric.
Now, West Virginia is just one of several states losing seats due to a decline in population. Other states are gaining seats due to an increase in population. How is that expected to impact some of these other races heading into the midterms?
Yeah, well, you have, I believe, 5 other House races where their 2 incumbents have been paired together, just like in West Virginia. So that's going to be another kind of important test of different wings of both the Republican and the Democratic Party. And then in other places, you've seen states gain seats. And so these tended to be redder states in the South and West, so places like Texas and Florida. And as a result, Republicans look like they're going to pick up a seat or 2 in those places.
So what else are you watching for as the results come in tonight?
I think one of the most interesting storylines is back in the Nebraska governor's race. We've actually seen a fair amount of party switching going on. There have been about 5,000 Democrats who unenrolled with the Democratic Party, and about the same number, in fact, actually more people have joined the Republican Party. So it looks like maybe there are some Democrats who are switching over their registration to vote in the Republican primary, given that it's so contested. And it'll be interesting to see whether that helps the moderate candidate, Brett Lindstrom. Normally, this would be kind of a drop in the bucket. There are a lot more Republicans, like true Republicans in Nebraska, than there are these party switching Democrats. But in a very close race, and the polls indicate that this race is a total toss-up, it could be the difference maker.
All right, 538 senior elections analyst Nathaniel Rakich, thank you.
Thanks.
And for more information on the midterms and all things politics related, you can scan the QR code in the lower right corner of your screen. We'll have the latest on the 2022 primaries from the team at 538. Coming up, a former jail official is dead and a murder suspect is back behind bars after a nationwide manhunt. What we're learning from investigators when we come back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. A former Alabama jail official is dead and the murder suspect she was accused of helping escape is back behind bars after a more than week-long manhunt. Investigators say Vicky White shot and killed herself, and Casey White surrendered to officers at the end of a police chase in Evansville, Indiana. Authorities say U.S. Marshals crashed into a vehicle the couple was driving to stop the pursuit. For the first time in 6 decades, Queen Elizabeth was absent from the opening of Parliament this morning. Buckingham Palace says the 96-year-old Queen reluctantly made the decision to not attend due to mobility issues. Prince Charles stepped in to deliver the ceremonial speech that formally opens the new session. Her crown was there, though, to hold her place right between Prince Charles and Prince William. She has only missed this event twice in her 70-year reign. And the FDA is now working to address the baby formula shortage. The agency says it's expediting the review process for specialized formula and imports, working with manufacturers to increase supply and addressing supply chain issues to try to ensure that shelves are stocked. Formula has been in short supply since a few formulas were recalled. 6 states are reporting now that more than half of baby formula suppliers were completely sold out, and some stores are limiting how much formula a family can buy. Experts warn you should not dilute your baby's formula or try to make it last longer, and warn against trying to make your own formula. And we are celebrating Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month all month long. Today, we're talking to members of the community making their mark in comedy. Zoreen Shah had the chance to sit down with the comedians, including trailblazer Margaret Cho.
In recent years, Asian American stars like Ali Wong, Hassan Minhaj, and Joe Coy have taken the comedy world by storm. Today, Coy is one of the biggest names in comedy.
I'm half white, half Filipino, which means my dad was in the military.
We recently met up with Coy at the Hollywood Improv. He said coming up, he was often told that broader audiences wouldn't get Filipino-themed jokes.
If I send my son to school with a Tupperware container, he goes to school with a clear bowl, and it's got a blue lid, and it says Tupperware on the lid. My mom's Tupperware, usually an empty Cool Whip container.
That joke took me over the top. What I like is not only did Filipino Americans relate to it, but then everyone was relating to it.
The 50-year-old is no overnight success story, doing stand-up for 25 years before his big break.
There were people that opened for me that were getting specials. I'm like, what is it that I'm doing wrong that I'm not getting looked at? Like, what is it?
Did you ever ask yourself, I wonder if it's because I'm Asian American, or was that not even a problem?
Of course that was in my mind.
Coy finally broke through with his hit Netflix special, Live from Seattle.
My mom cured everything with Vicks Vaporize. Vicks Vaporize.
Now Hollywood has come calling. His film Easter Sunday opens in theaters in August.
Easter Sunday is like the Filipino Super Bowl.
There he is. There's my kuya.
Welcome home, bro.
Coy says he wants to use his success to inspire other comics of color.
When I found out Rob Schneider was half Filipino, it's like, oh, okay, well, Rob's Filipino. Okay, I can be a comedian too because he made it. That means I can make it. Because it's hard. Try not to cry right now. But it's just like, that's what you want, right? You want to inspire. It's like, we're here, we're all here.
That's what I'm talking about.
But 30 years ago, Coy was inspired by this groundbreaking performer. Margaret Cho was already paving the way, starring in her own sitcom.
Look at me, I'm middle management Barbie.
One of very few Asian faces in stand-up.
Actually, I wasn't on real Star Search, I was on Star Search International. They had a real problem with me because I look this way, but I talk this way.
The groundbreaking star sitting down with us at Flappers Comedy Club near Hollywood.
In so many ways, you were so ahead of your time.
I think it was just I was more interested in pursuing my own dream of being a stand-up comedian than what I was doing in a world that lacked other representation.
Cho's bold, humorous spin on being Korean American made it okay to laugh at sensitive subjects.
I think white people want to tell Asian people how they should feel about race because they're too scared to tell black people.
Cho says she loves what stand-up looks like today.
I'm excited at seeing so many different Asian American comedians now. My greatest achievement isn't really my work as it stands on its own, but it's the fact that I influenced an entire generation to pursue their dream in stand-up comedy.
And she really did. Margaret Cho was on the very first Asian American sitcom. It was called All American Girl. Now, it took another 2 decades for the next one that was fresh off the boat. But during that time, Margaret and a few others, they really did inspire this next generation of Asian American comedians. Diane?
They sure did, and we all get a few more laughs for it. Thanks, Serene. And do stay with us. I'm Diane Macedo.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.